This is the Chasing Tomorrow podcast with Joe Gagnon. We bring you captivating conversations that will inspire all of us to go after our own version of a high-performance life.
So, Joe, we were talking a little bit about your blog post before.
Yeah.
And you've done a blog every day for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite blog post?
It's a funny thing, 4,000, whatever, I don't know, 200 days in a row I've been writing a blog. And actually, interesting enough, I one day went back and read some of the old ones, because you're like, I wonder if I was any good. And I was surprised at how good some of it actually was. But two that have been very memorable to me. One's called The Rusty Swing Set. So I've written over 4,000 blog posts. And of course, you get to be a better writer over time. And so I went back and started to read some of them to see if anyone really struck me, because you like your most recent ones. And there are two that always sort of stick out as very impactful. One is called The Rusty Swing Set. And in that, it's like this idea that if you had kids and they were using the swing set, and every day they use it and it works beautifully. And then they get older and they stop using it. And one day, like 4 years later, you walk back to the swing set and it's all rusty. And that swing set that was very vibrant and usable now became unusable. And it's the same thing that happens to us in life, which is that if we're not using ourselves, our systems, our physicality, our mind, we get very rusty. And so it's actually through the use, it's the activity, it's the living that keeps us vibrant, healthy, and, very functional. And so I like that. The second one was that life doesn't come in a pill. That, it'd be great if you could just swallow this one pill and then everything would be perfect. But I'm not even sure I would like that, right? Because we want to actually experience life. We want to feel it, whether it's running an ultra marathon, whether it's taking a new job, whether it's building a new friendship, whether it's actually reading a book. It's all of the sort of the systems that we put to use that make us feel better, right? That actually get us motivated to do more. And so life doesn't really come in a pill. I like to say that the best journey is one that was lived and earned. So I lived it and I earned it. And I feel really good about that.
Yeah, so the Rusty Swing Set, it makes me think of two principles. So one of them, just from a scientific standpoint, of entropy. Right, entropy, where like things are constantly breaking down. You have that like the motor car where you gotta wind it back, let it roll, and then it dies out, and then do that again. So that I love that analogy of the rusty swing set, and also similar to there's another saying. It's we don't stop playing because we get old. When we stop playing, or we don't get old, so we stop playing.
Yeah. We
stop playing, and then we get old.
Yeah. I think, play is really important throughout our lives, because I think that if you start to, first, when we're kids, right, it sort of reflects probably the purest form of what the human system is about, right? It's about joy, it's about love, it's about discovery, it's curiosity, it's learning, it's experiencing. I mean, it is amazing, those first 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And then we start to repeat over and over again, and then we get a little bit tired because the things that really get us excited we've stopped doing, which is the learning, exploring, the curiosity, and the feelings. Play is part of that. Play is a way to stimulate our senses. It's a way to feel something. It's fun to go out and play, And you'd say, I feel like a kid again. But that is a good experience to have. And it's up to us. The pickleball craze has sort of been cute because a lot of people are playing. They're having fun. For the first time, it's not like just pure competitive, right? It's actually socializing with activity across age groups. I mean, it might be one of the more intriguing sort of social constructs that have happened, at least in my lifetime, to see people will stay 4, 5, 6 hours at a pickleball court, spend their whole day with each other, and then they want to go back the next day because they're finding such reward in all of those experiences, which is really what play is about, which is what we should be doing. Every time we go out and do that, we feel better. So we should keep doing that till our last day.
I'm laughing because I've been playing a lot of pickleball. I have a pickleball date tomorrow.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and like that play, that laughter, I find whenever I'm stressed in my day, because I've gone extended periods without play. It's funny, Sean and I, we've connected on that play at that men's retreat. And when I moved that body, I started laughing. I was playing basketball with my brother for the first time in maybe 15 years. And I had childlike laughter, and it felt so good. It felt so healing. You talking about life doesn't come in a pill, and sometimes we look for that pill, that pill to fix it all. And on my journey, I feel like some of the best medicine, the best healing is laughter.
Yeah.
It can come through.
I think when we lose our sense of humor, we sort of close off part of who we are. And I've had the good fortune of being a CEO many times, and that's not to say ego one way or the other, it's just a role. But you do run the risk in that job of taking yourself and what you do too seriously. And you can sort of lose your sense of humor. And in that, you probably lose a bit of empathy, the feeling how others feel. You lose a little bit of your sort of your soul, and so you just become sort of more robot-like. And I think that if we get deep into the way that our human system works, we could understand there's a set of neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. There's these things with dopamine people talk about, serotonin, oxytocin, GABA, adenosine. All of these are neurochemicals to make us behave in a way that allows us to survive and then thrive. And when we close off the ability to stimulate them, we don't thrive nearly as much. And so all of these are protective mechanisms for us to actually be productive humans. And so, yeah, we need to sit with each other and have camaraderie. We need to love each other. We need to find challenge. We need to feel that we're a part of something. All of those are part of who we are as humans, and we just have to use that sort of capability we have. And when we do, then life gets pretty good, and you don't need a pill.
So you threw out a lot of terms like dopamine. I'm not familiar with GABA, those other. What about the human body do you find most fascinating?
Oh man, first, if we go back just for a second, like in terms of what I did in my life. So I was a kid, I'm pretty active like everyone else, then I get into the work world, and I just worked. White collar guy, suit and tie, all I knew how to do was work, and then I had a family, and I worked and then took care of the family, and I never did anything. And what I realized was that I was missing out on movement and what happened with movement. And so I started movement over 20 years ago, and that took the form of a run of a mile and one push-up. Maybe it was a walk, maybe it was ride a bike. And little by little, what I found, and what got me really curious about the human body, was its adaptability, that at any point in time, it's ready to go. Yeah, you might get a little bit of soreness from doing something, but really that its ability to endure way beyond, to take on more burden, take on challenge, to grow and develop, to get faster, stronger. It's like, oh wow. And the same thing happens with the mind. If I dig deeply into a topic, I learn more, I read more, I listen to people. So our adaptability, the ability to grow, I haven't found at any of my age that stops. And so I'm just intently curious about how long it continues. And I think the answer is that the more you use it, the longer it continues. And so vitality and lifespan, which is sort of this functionality over time, can go on for a long time if you're willing to put in the motion, the energy, and the stimulus that makes that system work. And I'm like, oh wow, this is a pretty good secret, because back to our silly thing, you don't need a pill, you just need to move, you need to think, you need to engage, you need to be, and the magic happens.
We're talking about adaptability, but that there can be a lot of friction at first if you don't want to change. So how would one...
Sometimes what prevents us from adapting or changing is a bit of fear, lack of knowledge, and sort of no role model that might tell you how to do something, and maybe not understanding fully what the return on that effort is. And so then we don't do it. There's a term called homeostasis, which is the body at rest, the body at balance, right? And that's important too. To actually kick yourself into gear, you have to go do something. And so sometimes maybe the way to do that is to do it with other people who know how to do it. To put yourself in a community of people who are active, maybe playing pickleball. Maybe it's a work community. Maybe it's a reading club. Maybe it's any of the activities that you can do with other people so that you can both follow their lead, learn from them, and then you start to realize like, oh wow, I can do that too. And so then we start to adapt, and then we start to get more convinced. But in the beginning, I think there's usually this like, well, I can't do that. And that comes a bit from both resistance against homeostasis, but also from fear, because maybe you don't know. And so all you need really is a little bit of support, a hand on your back, a little bit of guidance, a feeling like I'm not going to fail, and then we'll go give it a try and probably succeed.
In your journey and all your success, did that voice ever come up?
Did I ever think I can't? I think I might think about it just a little bit differently. I think that I believed other people thought I couldn't. And so that frustrated me. So it was a bit of, you're too small, you're too skinny, you're not smart enough, you're not And they were trying to tell me I can't. And I didn't like that feeling. And so often then I would say, well, I wonder if I put in the effort, what might happen? And I sort of tripped into a bit of success. I put in some effort. I said, yes, I can do that, even though I didn't know how to. And then all of a sudden I started to learn that I was more capable than I had realized. And then that became a self-reinforcing behavior. And so I was probably sort of pretty lucky in that no one wants to be bullied or made fun of. But I think that really actually motivated me to show them that they were wrong, even though these people are gone in my life. But I always had that feeling like, I'm not that, I'm this. The other thing that happened is those times when you found some struggle, I always thought that you could frame it as the beginning or the end. And I never wanted it to be the end, which is the can't. I always wanted it to be the beginning, even if it was some kind of failure. Because you'd be like, okay, well, let's just pull ourselves back up and start over and find out what happens there. And so, yeah, I actually don't think the word can't has any sort of usefulness in the English language, because you should at least give it a try. Maybe you won't.
That's so powerful, because that reminded me of an affirmation that I used to say to myself when I was down on my luck and I was really just rebuilding. So a little bit about my story. In high school, I had a lot going for me. Class president, captain of the football team, in the yearbook I won personality.
What?
I go to Bates College. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
NESCAC school.
Yeah.
Big culture shock. And like an elitist private school coming from big public school. Couldn't fit in, couldn't find my tribe, and that was my strength, was my sociability. And dealt with some death. Close friend at 18 passed away, grandfather passed away, closest friend was suicidal, all in 1 year. Life stuff, right?
Yeah.
And life was hitting me. Football, I played football, I realized I'm coming to an end of my career. The seasonal effect was the worst. The gray skies, that's what like really killed my motivation. But I just remember was like focusing on that motivation, or focusing on that affirmation, and then that was like finding power in myself. It's hard because there's just like, it's so overwhelming at first to change, but I just remember finding a little thing that I can grab was, let me just remove I can't, that phrase I can't, from my vocabulary.
Yeah, it's somewhat interesting, because if you don't like your circumstance, well then why don't we do something about it? Rather than sort of wallowing in the misery of the circumstance like that. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to be happy. And someone says, well, you can't always be happy. I'm like, oh, no, you can. Happiness is intrinsic. It's a feeling you have. It has nothing to do with what you have or what you can do. And so let's just start there and say, like, I got this. This thing can work. Maybe it's going to take a little longer. Maybe it's going to be hard. But what if you fall in love with hard? What if you fall in love with the struggle? What if you show that you can overcome? Like in your football analogy, if you're the guy as a running back and there's these big guys in front of you, isn't it exciting if you can run through the line and get past them? But that's a big struggle, right? But that's what you would actually go do if you're a football player. Well, we can do the same thing in life. And sometimes our patience is our enemy, because we're not patient. We want it to happen fast, but we have a long life, so why would it have to happen fast? The second is that maybe there are other people who are doubters, but so what? Like maybe move ourselves out of that circumstance, or maybe prove them that they're wrong. And then, so this comes back to, it's all about us. Like there is no victim here. Like there's no reason to be a victim. And I don't know if there's a definition of success. Like this is your life. Like make it be what you want it to be. And so I think that that is the best way to make that happen, though, is with other people who reflect that kind of lifestyle, that behavior, that sort of excitement about life. If you hang out with them, you will change. That's for sure. Because you'll be like, oh, wow, they could do it, I could do it. No reason why not. And I'm not in the Olympics. Probably neither are you. But that doesn't make them better than me. You know, I ran a 100-mile race this past weekend. 7th time I've done that. It was a struggle. The first 50 miles were beautiful. Second 50 miles were a bit of a horror show. My stomach fell apart. But I found a way to the finish line. Someone said to me in the middle, do you want to drop out? I was like, no, it's a struggle. I sort of thrive on struggle. Doesn't feel good, but it wasn't damaging. It was my stomach. Like in a day, it's going to be fine. So, but I was with a community of people who were very supportive. They knew how to help me get to the finish line. Search out the people who are going to give you energy. Search out the people who are going to support you. And when you do that, then the magic can happen. Right? Because then anything's possible.
But where do people find that tribe? Because for me, I knew there was this bliss point at one point, this reverse Goldilocks zone, where I outgrew the people who
Yeah.
I came up with.
Yep.
And I didn't have the skills to attract those people who are making the moves that I want to be a part of.
Well, so yeah, these are never simple answers, of course, right? So back to like who's in charge here of your life, right? You are. So if you want to find a tribe, I actually think it's a little easier than it used to be, because we can use some social tools to join a club, like join an outdoors club, go find a trail association, join a running club, a reading club, a pickleball thing. Just show up. The other day I was out for a run and I walked by a pickleball game and I was standing there and the person said, "Do you want to play?" I didn't have a racket. I was like, hey, wow, look at that. They're open to it. So you have to show up. You have to be open to it. So that's one part. Put some effort into it. The second is bring something to it. Like put some time in. If you want to go hang out with some smart people, then maybe read, research, learn, build a point of view. Like be responsible for yourself. Make yourself interesting so that when you do meet people, you have something to say. Right? Practice at some activity. Get good at it. Right? I think if you take ownership for your own self, you show up better with others, and then all of a sudden they want you to be part of what's going on and you have something to bring. And it's not a dependent, it's this cooperative kind of relationship. Now, the last thing, I think I wrote about this in a blog, but if not, this is what I've said on stage all the time, right? If you're not invited to a party, then have one, right? If you have one, then you can invite people and they will come. Right? So stop putting yourself into that victim thing. And don't worry, if no one ever invites you, that is okay. I still probably don't get invited much, but I go to a lot of stuff. Like I go to a race, I invite people, hey, would you like to support me? I'm gonna go plan an ice climbing trip. You guys wanna come? Just keep on doing it. And yeah, maybe you'll get more no's than yeses, but that's okay. Because you don't need a million people, you just need a few. Just find it, and then it starts to mushroom up and build up. So it takes a little bit, but I had nothing. I was the kid in no cliques. I was not on the football team. I was on nothing. And I earned my way in by just showing up and trying to be the best version of myself I could be.
I think that is some of the most underrated pieces of advice and something I came across recently. And I love how you put it, like if you don't have a party, start the party, invite the party. That's an option. I was talking to my friend one time, and just like this principle of like, wait, you can do that? Oh wait, I can do that?
Yeah.
I can start I can start a social event.
That's right.
And that is so, I think it's so powerful because humans are social creatures. We look for connection. We desire and seek connection. And I'm like, oh wait, I can do that. I can start the party. So I love that as a great reminder.
And others want to be invited too. So you're actually literally turning it back on itself. By actually doing something like that. Hey, Thursday morning, we're gonna go for a run on the trail. Maybe the first time one person comes and they tell another person, 9 months from now we got 30 people showing up. And so, yeah, I think that this sort of, like, let's not be any victims and let's not wait for it to happen. Let's go make it happen because that's what the power we have inside us.
We're talking a little bit about, the 100-mile races, about your career too. And I have a question. What are you more proud about? Your multiple 100-mile races or your 8-figure exit? Because they're both extremes. One is an extreme, or they're both, like, there's some overlap, but one's a high achievement of your external world and one's a high achievement of your internal world.
Yeah, it's a good question. When I started off making $1,000 a month with a rather inauspicious start, it didn't feel so good. And then 15 years later, I made the partner level at a big firm called Ernst & Young. And it was a crowning sort of achievement. In my business career, at that moment, I felt like, wow, I had achieved something that other people achieved, not me. And it came from the effort I put in, the results that I created, the way I showed up. And so I feel like in the beginning part of my life, that was really important to me to get both the financial success and socially acceptable success. But what I realized was that was just this one sort of dimension. It wasn't as much about me. It was just about what I could do. And I think as I moved on to sort of what I call getting out of the suffocation of business success and into sort of a much more vibrant and multidimensional life, then I started realizing that I didn't have to rely on a system. I could rely on myself. And I think Thoreau wrote Self-Reliance, and it's all about, I think that's when we feel the best, which is we know we can count on ourselves to get something done. And what's been interesting about some of the ultra marathons and the difficulty and the struggle has been that while yes, you might have some support, you really get to the finish line because of what you're able to do. And I think that's really reinforcing with whatever other challenges you're willing to take on. Sometimes it's about putting yourself in those situations that would make you count on yourself at a very, very deep level. And so it's probably not just one or the other, but it has been sort of a building over time. They have this Maslow's hierarchy, which says you start basic needs met on the way to self-esteem, on the way to self-actualization. And I think my definition of the self-actualization is when you finally fall in love with yourself, when you believe in yourself so deeply that you're no longer trying to prove anything to anyone, and you're satisfied with your reason to be here, and that you are a contributor, and you are a very functional member of family, society, work, and not dependent in any way. That's what self-actualization is, and I think it's the combination of both of those successes that got me to that place.
When you can count on yourself, when you were tested and then you rise to the occasion, is one of the best feelings in the world. So I was at Run Club last week, and these kids my age who I used to play football against, these Stanford kids, we knew of each other, some rivalry. And I was running towards the back. I was with the social group, and then I decided to turn it up. And then as I'm running towards the end, and I just ran like 0.25 miles to the top. And there's this one kid who was the guy in Stanford. Like, in many respects, I was the guy in Norwalk. I remember him. That was my rival. So we started running with each other. And then he's like, yo, come on, let's go. So I just ran. Now I'm a little tired. I'm just turning it up. Now I'm running toe-to-toe with him. And for a good paces, we're toe-to-toe. And then he catches like one or two steps, right? And I'm like, man, this is like, oh, this is a test right now.
This is real.
This is real. And now, and I'm like, I have that voice in my head, like, don't give up. But then I'm starting to justify, oh, it's okay. This is for fun, it's for competitions, or it's not for competition. And then we match pace again. And he's like, because this is now the finish line, like, it's all out. He's like, all right, we're going to run to the flowers, and then we're done. So then I'm like, I have a competitive nature. I'm like, let's sprint. It's like, all right. So then we sprint, and we're running. We're, like, all in the tank. And then I started to pass him out. He started to give up. I finished, and then I won the race.
Nice.
And that right there, like, because I'm a retired athlete at this point, I don't really know. And then, but I had that test, and this kid, like, he was no bum, like, he was really good. So the fact that, like, I was tested,
I think that happens a lot in life. The opportunity to sort of, instead of blaming the system for why it didn't work, putting in the effort to make it work. I was talking about, I made that level of partner when I was in my early career, and the first year I was passed over, and I came home and I was sitting around sort of moping a little bit. And Anthea said to me, what's the matter with you? And I said, oh, they passed me over. And I start whining about the whole thing, and it wasn't fair. And she said, well, why don't you just go prove them they're wrong? I was like, oh, thanks for nothing. And so that's what I did the next year. I so far made it that there was no question. It was such a good advice. Don't get to the point before. This is just prove people they're wrong. Show this guy you can run. Let's put the best effort we in. And look, if it didn't happen, you still know you put your best effort. And that's what we want to hold ourselves to all the time, because that's what you want to feel about yourself, but you want the rest of the world to know that too. And if I'm going to count on you, then I want to know that you're going to bring your best effort, not a bunch of excuses. But that's what we owe each other. And when we get there, then life is actually better, because really, the truth is, if we could count on each other, then we'll go deeper. They go deeper. It's actually pretty powerful.
Joe, where does this mindset come from, your personal mindset? Because you said some stuff about like victim mentality, which I share, and I don't find many people who have that same beliefs, because it's so easy to blame the system, blame somebody else, and you're talking about just like self-accountability. So do you think a parent instilled it in you? Was it just natural given? Where does this mindset come from?
It's such a good question. I think there were a couple things. First, I did have parents who were very reinforcing all the time. You can do more, you can do better, but also very supportive. Like, it's okay. What's the worst that can happen? You could always move back in the basement, kind of thing. So you had your safety net of sorts, which gives you a little bit of freedom to give it a shot. I didn't actually like the other feeling. I didn't like the feeling of being somewhat of a nobody. And I was like, okay, well, if you don't like that, then what are you going to do about it? I couldn't stay in that space. I didn't like being passed over. I didn't like being successful because other people thought that I wasn't capable. That was their decision. So that was the second thing. I fought hard against that. I think early on I found some success, which is also self-reinforcing. I gave a couple of efforts to do something and volunteered at the work world, or said, hey, maybe I'll try that effort. Like when years later someone said, hey, let's go ride a bike for a long time. If you see a little glimmer of hope, then go after it, because there's probably a much bigger window of hope there on the other side of it. And I did get the chance to have some really, really strong mentors that I sat and listened to, and I watched and I observed, and I used their energy as well. If they were going to let me be around, then I was going to be around them. And so, yeah, that was very helpful. And then I think the last thing was I ended up just very fortunate. My family situation was very supportive of everything that I wanted to try to do. So I never had any energy loss there. I think try to find people who are not trying to change you, but believe in who you are and let you be that. That's the world you should hang out. And then it just continues to, it's like the inertia, right? That snowball rolls downhill and it just goes faster and faster.
One thing I'm excited though that I share a lot about, like, why, for me, how do I stick out? And I say I get anxiety if I'm just a number. If I know I can't have some individuality on the group, I need to stick out, I need to do something. I tell people it's because I'm an Aries, but I really resonate with that, and I think that is a catalyst for creation.
Look, we all have some level of ego in us, right? And we would like to be appreciated for what we are and what we can do. But maybe what we need to do is just hold ourselves accountable to ourselves. Are we happy with our result? Are we happy with our own effort? Like, why have to use a third party as the measure for who you are? Why not start using yourself as a measure for who you are? So a simple way to do that is write down what you're committing to. Did you deliver on it? You'll feel good if you did. And you don't really need the external validation. Because sometimes what's going to happen is the system won't work in your favor for whatever the reason. There are some times where these things happen. They can't be sort of tragic. They just have to be just part of the journey. I don't have to be, like when I was writing my book, I thought the title should be Always Happy, Never Satisfied. Like, be happy with your life, but you can work on performance all the time. You can always work on being better. This is about ourselves though. I think that self-reliance idea keeps coming back to me, which was that maybe if you didn't have a system that supported you, other than your family, maybe you then had to create more self-reliance, and maybe everything else was earned, and then it's more durable. And then even when other stuff happens, you have yourself to count on, and that's great, because that rock is always there for you.
So talking about self-reliance and self-accountability, are you familiar with the 4 agreements? So I believe agreement 1 is be impeccable with your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. But if you say if you're going to do something and you don't, there's misalignment, and it can manifest in other areas in your life.
Yeah, so I always believe that before you make a commitment to anyone else, make it to yourself first. Understand the implications, right? Because if you do, then you're probably highly probable to go deliver on that. And I think that often we haven't thought about the implications. So then you'll get the phone call, sorry, Joe, I can't do that because I got to pick up the kid at school. I'm like, hey man, like that's cool. I'm glad you have to pick up the kid at school, but you didn't think about that? Like, of course you just didn't. Because you would have known that and you would have said to me, oh, I can't do it before you committed, and then I get this phone call. So I think we have to actually go through the process and work ourselves to understand what am I really committing to. Because I do think it shows up as to who we are and who we could count on. Isn't it great when someone says, like, I know I can count on you? And then why would they say that? Well, because you always were there when you said you were going to be. It doesn't mean you're always there when you said you were going to be. That's the key. When we were raising our kids, I don't know that we were this explicit, but there were 3 dimensions that we thought were really important. Creating independence, autonomy, and a sense of belonging. So the independence is to be your own person. Autonomy, be able to decide on your own. And then sense of belonging, always know that you're part of something. But the third one doesn't have to be there all the time. You just have to know it's always there. Like, you don't have to use it, but you want to know that I have someone has my back. And that is so empowering to each of us to say, oh my God, well, I'll go try anything then because they got my back. And I think that we often know what makes for powerful people and powerful relationships, but we rarely give it away because sometimes it's scary to us to do that. Like, maybe what I feel is better is a highly independent, non-dependent relationship that's highly cooperative. So meaning that you don't need me, but we can work great together. Needing in a dependent way, right? Meaning that the only way you can do it is with me. But we should be non-dependent and cooperative. Then those relationships are beautiful because we empower each other to be the best version of ourselves.
Wow, mind blown right there. That's something I'm going to revisit in my mind. And you said something about implications, right? When we make decisions, are there any frameworks that you use to make decisions? Are you thinking like second, third, fourth order consequence? Because in business, a lot of these decisions we make can affect other things. So is there any frameworks that you
I do think that there's some core values that we have. I think there's some foundation principles that we need to be explicit about. And then I think there's this social contract piece. The value system starts with respect. Like you respect people, right? It starts with allowing people to be who they are. So you create a value system that you live to, integrity. And then I think there's this foundation set of principles which says, what's really important to me? And so like pick a family, and I might say, we're going to save for the kids to go to college. That's what we're going to do. Well, if that's the principle, if that's the foundation, then you don't go on an expensive vacation to Tahiti, okay? It doesn't work. Debate those. You make that agreement and you stick to it, and it's just foundational, right? And then there's the social contract, which is we have a dialogue all the time that's back and forth and open, and even if it's agreed upon, it's very explicit. So you say to me, hey, I'm going to go to play pickleball tomorrow, and you're like, oh, okay, great. Just it's a social contract rather than you just walking out, I don't even know where you went. This is this sort of respect for each other. And so, yeah, I do think being more explicit about it, the foundation, whether it's about religion or culture, it's about money, it's about education, it's about all, but be just clear. I'm not saying I know what the answer is for you or anyone, but clarity actually really provides for a resilient relationship and a resilient life.
We're talking about the social contract, and that made me think of another interpretation of the social contract of like, society forms together, we give up a little bit of freedom, but then we get protection. And I'm just curious, through history, is there any lessons throughout history that really you resonate with, that you think about a lot?
Like, I don't think that we treat people equally. I think it's a shame. I don't understand. Like, we're all humans. We have the same right as everyone else. I don't think that gender matters, or race matters, or religion matters. We have people who have dogmas that they defend for no reason, really. I don't think that we have, any of us, a right. We have a right to all share equally in the resource and the opportunity to live. And so the more deeply I understand, I think it comes from insecurity. I think it comes from fear. I think it comes from people who are trying to control because they can't actually live with this concept of power with rather than power over. Power with is a very enabling kind of concept. Power over is this domination through fear. And so through human history, we have sometimes sort of defaulted to this idea that the only way that we can win is to overcome and overlord people. And I find that just unconscionable. And I just wish we could get over ourselves and respect people. Like I always say, you can't even love someone if you don't respect them. And I think that it's really important that we continue to fight for deep level of equality and fairness, opportunity, love, regardless of any of the characteristics. They are just each of us. Like, why shouldn't we be what we are? And that has been something that, has been a little bit hard to some. Now, like, we're at a place now, we don't need to be in wars. Look, we got the land, everyone's got enough, there's abundance, there's enough resources. Should we share more? Absolutely, we can move in that direction. But generally, it is sort of very sad and disappointing when I see some kinds of behavior that comes from sort of the insecurity and the weakness of some people who maybe can get to a better place.
Definitely talking about the dogma, there's so many people that will die on hills for their dogmatic beliefs. And as I just become more mature, I've been thinking a lot about from first principles. A lot of things I'm talking with my family are just like bringing up the idea. There's so many beliefs that I was inherited, but when I asked, has this been my experience? No. And you've gone against the grain in many areas. Are there any beliefs that you hold that typically go against the grain that come up?
Well, I think that certainly my lifestyle is not normal. I had to fight through a lot of the sort of the peer pressure. I gave up drinking alcohol 20 years ago. That was, first I had to hide it because everyone thought it was a bad idea. I stopped eating meat products, and that was a problem too because that's what everyone else did. And then start doing some of these extreme activities, and people are like, why do you need to do that? And so yeah, I think that when I've been writing my blog, that more people have asked me, when am I going to stop? Rather than, wow, that's amazing. And so yeah, I have found that my path is my path, not supported by everyone, and sometimes more supported by strangers than friends and family. I'm not here to make anyone feel bad. Not to say that I do more than anyone else. I'm doing my thing. I should be able to do that. And I think I do it in a responsible way. Yeah, some of the challenges are pretty big and they might seem daunting, but by the time I ran a marathon on 6 continents in 6 days, I had already run 35,000 miles. I had flown 4 million miles around the world. I had been on more overnight flights. I had been to all those continents and countries. Like, it was not that far-fetched to go do that. I mean, like, I trained my whole life for it. But there were a lot of people who thought, you shouldn't do that. It might be too much. And so I do think that as long as we are sort of within the bounds of being responsible individuals, like we're not taking too much resource or hurting other people, we should be able to be free to make those choices, live the way we want. And yeah, maybe it sort of goes against the norm, but I got pretty darn focused on human performance. And so I did try to do anything I could to optimize on that. And that was my sort of change that really helped me.
Wow. So I don't know what's more impressive. You ran 100-mile races on a plant-based diet, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And or the six marathons in 6 continents in 6 days. Like, wow.
What's interesting about all that I've done was, I would say all of it was improbable. Like, there was no world where, when Joe Gagnon graduated from college, if you wrote out what I would call my life resume and handed it to me, I would have been, not me, who is that person you're talking about? And so I've always had this sort of feeling like, I wonder why my aperture was so small at that moment. What was it that was allowing me to look through a pinhole rather than a big circle? And I think that ultimately, each time I went to try to do something, I got more confident in my ability to go do more. And then I started becoming a dreamer. And I was always like, I wonder if I could do this. Why don't I try that? And it kept working, and it kept working. And so then the dreamer in me is like, I think I like my language, which says the intersection of curiosity and courage is where magic happens. So being curious enough and bold enough to go give it a try, and like, poof, like, wow, it's amazing. So yeah, the first time you hear it, like, that's not possible, that's not me. And then you step back and say, well, why not? And I think that is what I've learned. And so yeah, I would say that anyone listening to me would probably say they wouldn't or couldn't do any of those things. That was me too. But after a while, you realize, wow, maybe I have more power in me than I realized.
You bring up like a crazy concept. Imagine seeing your resume right now to when you're 18-year-old self. Like, how mind-blown would you be?
And I do that because I get on stage and I have some fun with it, and I have my life report card and I show it to people. And in an instance, I can create credibility that is, there's no one in the audience who would have that list. Now, they have their list, it'd be very different, probably one-dimensional. But if you set out with 20 years and you write it down, I guarantee you'll get 90% of it done. You just will. Like, I have not climbed Mount Everest. Okay, that's cool. I made some choices not to go do that. I didn't think I could take 3 months off from work and put that kind of risk out there. But I don't believe that means I couldn't have done it if that wasn't my choice. And so, yeah, I'm still on the path too. I'm not done by any stretch of the imagination in terms of what my willingness is to take on bigger and harder challenges. So I think that everyone should sort of lean into their dream and make it happen.
When you're running these 100-mile races, you said after mile 50, then it starts to wear and tear on you. Where's your headspace out on that when your body's telling you no?
I think, like everyone says, what's your superpower? I have a couple. One of my superpowers is this idea of compartmentalization. So you put something in a box and it stays there and it doesn't go beyond that. During that race, I'm in this place that I go to, and that place doesn't contemplate much else other than survival through that process. And so everything makes sense during that process. So when you have pain, it's expected. When your stomach doesn't work, it's expected. It's all part of the dynamic of the stress that you're putting on your system. And you just continue to do the math against that moment Okay, I got to go 100 miles. I have 30 hours. I have to go at this pace. I have to eat these calories. Even if I have some struggle, I'll respond only to that. Like, okay, then I have to sit down to eat because that'll allow me to eat a little better. And you just keep working the problem for that container. Now, if I got into like, oh my God, I wonder how I'll feel 5 days from now, or maybe I'm hurting myself long term. Now, once I get outside the container, then it gets a little bit polluted and it's harder. And so with all the hard stuff we do in our lives, compartmentalize them. When I was traveling for business, I had 2 young kids, and everyone would say, do you miss them? I'm like, well, I don't think about it. Because if I did, then I would miss them and I wouldn't want to go. And I needed to go because that was my work. And so I had to do it because that was the choice we made, that I would be on the road. I had to make enough money so they could go to college. It got back to the principles. All this stuff was in a compartment. That's what I decided. So don't let other noise into that system. Because once the noise comes in, then it sort of breaks everything apart. And now it becomes a mess, and now you don't know what to do with the mess. But if you keep it organized against sort of the goals, the objectives, and the issues, then you find a way through it.
Actually, like, shrinks the problem, shrinks the mission at hand.
Yeah.
Because I think about, like, frameworks that I use to get over things, to just keep asking why, just break down the problem. When you look at the problem, it can be overwhelming. Hey, let me just chop it down by 10%, segment it, and that's something I'm going to take with me.
Mentalize. I think that the other part about that is if you, like we talked about this, like trying to be strong enough to not bring issue that happened into now. Like it's over. What if you fell on the trail? Like it's over. Okay, like don't keep on kicking yourself because you tripped. I think that this is such a big issue that we reevaluate ourselves because of what happened, not because of what we're capable of. And so then all of a sudden we've now challenged our ability. But our ability didn't change. The golfer who hit the ball in the woods, still the same ability on the next shot. But now they're worried that they hit the ball in the woods. So the strongest person is the one who compartmentalizes and said, okay, that happened, I'm done, now I'm on this. I still am a very capable golfer. And so the more that we can do that, the higher the probability of success, because then our system is working to its optimal in the moment rather than a system that has been degraded because of all the noise.
Yeah, because that self-talk can influence the direction where if you are going off of history of, like, let's say it not working, going back to that short memory, it can program your ambition in a negative way. But if you just have that short memory of, like, okay, I hit into, like, the sand trap right there, well, let me keep moving forward, and with a clear mind, clear conscious, you allow more of a flow and a more rhythm to get into prosperity.
Yeah, when someone says flow state, there are scientists who work on that. But to me, flow state is keeping the noise level really low. Right? That's what it is. It's meaning that I'm using the optimal energy that I have in that moment. Well, how do you do that? This is like in architecture, it's a math problem. Almost all of it, right? Imagine Joe has 100% today. Well, I got 7 issues going on and I let them take out 5% each. Now I'm down to 65%. How good am I going to be? Right? So like, I got to figure out how to compartmentalize those, not to take away from the 100. Right? They're just happening. I should be operating at maybe 90, but not 65. Every once in a while, it's good to get a compliment and someone says you're doing a great job. But also, if you're hitting your plan, you can tell yourself that. And by the way, we probably take feedback from a lot of people who aren't really experts, and we take it really as if they are. So someone says, hey, Joe, you're not really good at math. Well, what do they know? Like, why are they telling me that? Are they an expert? How did they come to that conclusion? And then all of a sudden you believe it because someone else said it? I think we should always just temper a little bit of the feedback system. Doesn't mean we shouldn't take it, but all of a sudden we can't become negative because of that. Do our own self-evaluation and then make a judgment.
Do your own self-evaluation, then and then go off of that. So I tweeted something the other day, and it's just this thought that I had. I said, the jester will never understand the decision-making of the knight because they do not have the same skill set. And it's very similar to that, where I'm taking criticism, but we're not doing the same thing. So you don't have the same skill set. I can face opposition, I can face friction. Well, maybe because you're projecting your self-limitations onto me.
Amen. Oh yeah. Back to the 6 marathons, and someone says, well, what if you don't get enough sleep? I'm like, well, I've done a lot of overnight flights. I understand the implications of it. And so they don't have a context for it. Now, they could train over the next 10 years and get there and do that. Then they'd have good input. So if you take input from people who've been there, done that, that's a good place.
And talk about those overnights, and I'm curious, what countries did you go to for the 6 continents?
Yeah. So I started in Australia, and then I went to Singapore, which was Asia. I went to Johannesburg, which was Africa. Then I went to London, which is Europe. I went to Sao Paulo, which is South America, Brazil. And then I went to Los Angeles and finished it up. And everyone would say, well, what about the seventh continent, which is Antarctica? Well, you can't commercially fly between any place in Antarctica. You only can do that on a sort of a chartered plane. And I did this on my own. I did it with commercial airlines. I bought my coach ticket and I just went and did it. So I'll probably try and go do the Antarctic Marathon one day and get all 7 continents in. No, that's on my to-do list.
So you're recovering on the plane after running, what,
26.2 miles. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the recovery that week was somewhat magical, to be honest. I was just on such a high every day. So excited about what I was setting out to do. Yeah, it was a little bit soreness that built up and all that. I didn't sleep that much on the planes because I was working on some photos and some responding to emails and keeping everyone sort of up to date. And then I always remember on the 7th day, I listened to the Eagles' Peaceful, Easy Feeling, went out for a run and said,
how does your perspective of being a citizen of the earth change when you're on every single continent?
oh my God, the most amazing thing is the people of the world are just so beautiful, so wonderful. They conspire in your favor to do just amazing things for you. Like, we live in a world of amazing people, and sometimes the news misrepresents everyone, you know? It's not a world of bad people, it's a world of amazing people. So I'm in Australia, waiting in the lounge to get ready to get on the plane, and I meet a mother and 2 kids. They were curious about what I was doing because we had all this gear and I had my shirt that said it. After about an hour of chatting, we go down and get online for the airplane, and turns out they're going on the same plane to Singapore. Let's say she was 13, comes up to me and she said, I'm really worried about you. I'm like, thank you, I appreciate that. She said, I have a business class seat. I'm willing to trade my business class seat for your coach seat. Like, can you believe this? Like, I had met this person for an hour. Your friends wouldn't give you their business class seat. Your brother wouldn't. No one would do this. And a total stranger was there compassionately trying to help and support me. The empathy was so deep and so profound. Everyone always wants to know, did I take the seat? I didn't. It was hard to say no, but there was the integrity of my plan to sit in coach the whole time. And so I graciously said, thank you. And during the flight, I went up and told her mother that she had raised really an amazing girl. And like, think about how wild that is, that a complete stranger offered that to you. Like, that's what the world is.
Wow. Something that you said is so powerful. Things conspiring in your favor. Can you break that down for me? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we think that the world's working against us. I think it's actually working with us. I think that we just have to pick our chin up sometimes and look. I think if we walk up to someone and say, I need help, they're there to help us. I think if we show our heart to the world gives back to us all the time. I think we're either fearful or antagonistic, and so maybe then they're defensive. But if we show up the other way, which is what I did that week, everywhere I went with my heart in my hands. I went loving the countries I was going to visit. I was there to celebrate with them, right? And then it's like, this is why I believe that I don't understand why we sometimes aren't happy with each other, because it's so easy. It really is. South Africa is a country of 95% black and 5% white, and for a long time the whites controlled the place. How is that even possible? And I had kids come out and run with me, and they just wanted to be with me. They wanted to be part of it. And so there was 100 people who came and joined on the run, and we were just hugging and high-fiving, and it was on the radio, and spirit of life, right? That's what we love. I was celebrating them in their country, on their land, with the spirit of love and compassion and empathy and excitement for life, and that's what happens. It's just beautiful.
I picture a moment like the scene from Forrest Gump, but in
Yes.
South Africa, where you just have this big...
I have that. Yes, that was what it was like.
That's amazing.
And so the other cool story was one of the girls. So I had set out that I was going to run under 4 hours for all these marathons, and so get to South Africa. It's the 3rd one, and we're running along, and there's a girl who's going to run the entire distance with me. And we get to mile 24, and she's starting to slow down. We get to mile 25, and I'm like, I got this 4-hour thing. I got to get there. And then she's like 100 yards back, and I said, what in the heck am I doing? Like, I got to finish this with her. So I ran back the 100 yards, and I went with her and said, we're coming to the finish line together. And we did, because the person mattered more than that goal. And there's a picture of me hugging her at the end that's just like something I can still feel to this day, because we did it together.
I felt that right there too, because there's times where, let's say, maybe I've had this personal mission, personal achievement, and I started with some people, but we're accelerating at different places, and then there's a point where they're not accelerating with me. I'm gonna stick with the horse that I rode in with. It's so beautiful, and it makes it more gratifying that, yeah, man, I could, for the ego, I could have got that personal achievement, but that memory that I can share with somebody else goes tenfold.
It's amazing. Actually, the better people that you hang out with, they'll always pace back to you, because they're not competing with you, and they're not there to make you feel bad. And it's usually the ones who are insecure and not that good. They're the ones who are trying to show you up. So yeah, I'm probably really good now at crewing, supporting, going slower, being part of the crew. Like, I'm not there to be in front anymore. I'm there to put my hand behind your back and make you feel like you're supported so that you can get there, because really that's what we should do for each other. Think of how wonderful the world becomes. In a world of abundance, there's enough space. If we get everyone operating at that sort of same high functioning level, feeling supported, I got your back, a lot of magic happens.
Yeah, talking about like the assist factor. It does take, I think, a little bit to like become secure in yourself, that the main focus. But then when it's like, I want my friends to win, so let me just like dish off the assist. It's such a great feeling.
Yeah, I think there's a point, even if I'm the highest performer, whoever I am, it's just for a short period of time, by the way. So like, let's get over ourselves that that's going to be forever. So for that period of time, cool. This is about living together productively. This is about being supportive, helping people grow, develop, challenge, get to the highest level of performance they're capable of. And to do that, it's not competitive at all. Like, this is all us. There's space for everyone. If you really want to run far, go with people. If you want to run fast, go by yourself. But if you really need to run fast, literally just please go train by yourself. We should be out there. I did a lot of adventure racing, and we learned there were 3 core rules to adventure racing. The first is that you're only as fast as the slowest person. And the way to make it miserable is to make them miserable. The second is never challenge the navigator, because if they lose their confidence, then no one knows where they're going. And the third is don't ever follow a team because you think they know where they're going, because they probably don't. And those rules apply pretty much to life in general. So I keep them always in mind, right back to like, the first thing is the slowest person on the team is the one you have to support. The person you decide who's in charge has to be in charge. And the third is that others don't always know. You probably know better.
Number 3 right there, I really resonate, and I have a similar story of just like, after this day, I decided I need to make decisions for myself. So I was like maybe 13, 14 years old at the time, and I had a bunch of my friends over at my house. And my friend who had a pool, they lived a few houses down. So we said, hey, like, it would be funny if we go jump in Michael's pool. But like, we was on the fence, oh, we shouldn't do it. Some said we should. But then I had my friend. He was like the smartest friend. He was the good friend. In my gut, I felt like we're going to get caught and this is not going to work out. But then my friend Evan, he was like really smart, really competent, made a lot of good decisions. So I was like, yo, Evan, like, what should we do? He's like, yo, let's go do it. Even though in my gut, I said we're going to get caught, we're going to get in trouble. So we go there, and sure enough, one of our other friends, his dad was like house sitting and caught us, and then we got yelled at. But I was like, I felt like we shouldn't go. I felt in my gut we shouldn't go, but I felt that peer pressure. I was like, all right, let me go with the group. I entrusted in somebody else, but similar to like, don't follow that other group because they might not know.
Yeah, and almost my good buddies always said we overestimate the capability of others and underestimate our capability. And I think that that's a trap we have to be careful of. Maybe they're really good. We would know that. But let's not overestimate just because maybe we're a little bit insecure. Let's validate before we give in to that. And I think we're better off.
Yeah, and I think to get to that, it comes from little victories. Your confidence comes from your competence, and that comes from little victories. And then once you get into a flow, you're like, you know what? I have that self-belief in myself. I have that reassurance because I know I can prove to myself, and I don't need to seek outward.
So think about this, Brendan, right? So I have a pretty high profile. If you type in Joe Gagnon into Google, you can find a lot about me. There's the YouTube, there's the Instagram, there's the blog, there's the book, there's the public stuff like TV. And so I interview someone for a job, and they come in, they don't even know who I am. Like, you haven't type Joe Gagnon into Google? Like you literally didn't even put that much of effort? Like, I'm not even that hard. And so I wonder, like, what about that person? Is that reflective of who they are? That they couldn't even put in that little bit of effort? I think that that's this good example of where you get the chance to show up the way you show up. So you should put in a little bit of effort. And when you do, you're better. And you can impress people. And you can bring a question. You can say, hey, I was researching your company. I was researching you. I actually had someone say to me one day, I read on page 76 of your book this. Why did you say that? I was like, oh my God, wow, that's a good question. But they put the time in to be prepared. They had a really thoughtful question. You know, someone could come and say, what's competitive landscape look like for your company? I've researched these others. What's your strategy? Like, you should not, it's not just simple stuff, but it's free. It's easy. I mean, now forget with AI, like I could ask any question, but I did actually do that one day. I asked Gemini and ChatGPT, who is this guy, Joe Gagnon? I don't know. The bar is so darn low that you should at least show up with that. And if you don't, then like you shouldn't have access to the event.
Yeah, and feeling prepared is one of the greatest feelings. Doing your due diligence. I remember when I was applying for my first job, I felt so prepared. I knew my touch points, and that was one of the first times where I had a big test. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't anxious because of that preparation.
Yeah.
Put that preparation in, it goes miles.
We always say when we get to the start line of a race, you know how to run. Just get over yourself. You know how to run. You know how to swim in a triathlon. But you sometimes have to remind yourself of that. I always thought about like $10 million pitcher on the mound. He's throwing some bad pitches. What does the coach possibly say when he walks up there? He says, throw the ball over the plate. It's like that simple. Like, oh, right. I was getting so cute. Like sometimes it's that simple. Throw the ball over the plate. Like just do the right, like it isn't that complicated. And maybe let's give them their lives. But the rest of us, we're all sort of competing for down the middle. Do a really good job. Be credible. Show up. Make sure that you do it with quality.
Yeah, and I learned my father about just like life in general. And one thing that he said just like that really stuck with me is if you work hard and you stay out of trouble, that can take you 80% of the way.
Yeah.
Just being like honest, just living that honest life.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone did. Who's made it to whatever you want as defined as success. And that can be revisited over time. I don't know, maybe your career is 40 years, 50 years, whatever. Like you can chunk it into pieces and then it can evolve, but those are foundations.